Good evening and welcome to the City of Pasco Council special meeting and regular workshop. The council thanks you for being part of our city government. At special meetings, the council takes formal actions on specific items, and during the workshops only discusses issues with no formal actions taken. Following Governor Inslee's recent statewide mask mandate, facial masks are required to be worn at all times while in the council chambers. If any individual is unable to comply with this order, then the meeting will be recessed until compliance is met. If compliance is not met, then the individual refuses to leave the chambers, then the meeting will either recess and reconvene only virtually or be adjourned. Agenda packets are available on the City of Pasco's website at www.pasco-wa.gov/agenda. Please note that the City Council meetings and workshops may be accessed through GoToWebinar. This meeting is also being televised live on Pasco TV, channel 191, on Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland, and is streamed on the city's Facebook page, website, and YouTube channel. This and previous council meeting video is available on the city's website. And lastly, the public may submit their comments and/or questions by contacting the city manager, city clerk, or by using the Pasco app. And with housekeeping issues out of the way, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Alvarado.
Present.
Maloney.
Present.
Milne.
Here.
Roach.
Present.
Serrano.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Barajas.
Present.
And Mayor Martinez.
Present, thank you. May we all please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. And next we'll go to item 4. And in the special meeting, we have hearings and council actions on ordinances and resolutions relating thereto. And tonight we have an ordinance, the 2021-2022 Mid-Biennium budget adjustments. And tonight I'm looking over here, so it looks like Director Richa, would you like to kick us off with that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and evening council. This is a shortened version of the presentation that we did last week. However, there is going to be a public hearing a little bit later on, so we have a high-level view of the budget adjustment request to the council. And we also want to point out that we have added about $850,000 in revenue for our water services, given the council's approval on water rate increases from the last week. So that is the only change from the prior week's data. With that, next slide, please. As we talked about last week, we are looking at about $2.5 million in new FTEs, and that accounts to about 18 FTEs across cities' different funds, but mostly coming from general fund, which is the city's largest fund. There's also CPI adjustments that staff had not accounted for when the budget was set back in October and November of 2019. So you'll see about $1.3 million of CPI adjustment, as well as land purchases for various city uses. And that accounts for about $15 million. And as we talked in length last time, sometimes some of these expenses will come duplicated just because of how cities' fund accounting works. Capital projects, need for additional funds, or projects being moved forward because of accelerating needs, maybe in the Broadmoor area or the industrial side of the city, is about $15 million, as well as various professional services, cost allocations that make up about $6.3 million. Next slide, please. These are the list of the 18 FTEs that we just spoke of, and largely coming out of our general fund and utility funds. You'll also see general fund/projects, and those are our FTEs that will be mostly working on our CIP projects. Next slide, please. General fund being the most important of city's funds, we're also adjusting or requesting an adjustment of revenue. That is mainly due to the fact that when we were setting the budget in 2019, we were really not sure of the economic conditions. And so we were very conservative in how we budgeted revenue. And similarly, we were very conservative in adding any additional expenses to an existing budget, just because we did not know how the economic conditions were going to be at this time. Some of the expenses for general fund includes, again, land purchases and CPI adjustments as well. Next slide, please. Capital Improvement Fund. This is also called Real Estate Excise Tax Fund, and mainly increase in expense authorization would go to new projects. This fund is a fund where it can only fund capital projects with very minimal maintenance expenses allowed. Some of those projects are the I-182 Broadmoor intersection improvement, Schlegel boating facilities, City Hall remodel, and the Burns Road pathway. Next slide, please. Economic Development Fund, a revenue of $12 million, which is essentially a transfer from the general fund to this Economic Development Fund to purchase a large piece of land, and then an expense of $15 million, which includes the purchase of the said land, as well as some investment or essentially funding the embankment repair activity and some balance of the Columbia East Force Main project, balance from what the grant has not reimbursed. Please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. And Utility Fund, the city's largest fund that provides water, sewer, stormwater, processed water reuse facility, and irrigation. And we are increasing the revenue by $286,000 plus the increase that the council approved last week, as well as an expense of $5.3 million. Next slide, please. So overall, council has already made some of these considerations, but these were the considerations that you had to make for this mid-biennium adjustment. Banking the property tax increase, increasing the water and sewer services rates, and the new positions is something that if you approve the budget, you would be approving those positions as well as the new capital projects. So those are the policy considerations that two of them you've already made, and two of them are what's on the docket today. Next slide, please. And with that, if you have any questions.
So that was the quick summary of the biennial budget. Does council have any questions of staff before I open the public hearing? Yes, Councilmember Serrano, please.
Just a quick question on the $20 million difference. Is that going to detrimentally impact our biennial budget overall, or what are we looking at?
No, we're making kind of a joke overall. You have a large percentage of your expense, almost $15 million, that you're buying an asset, and the joke was that for an accountant, that's not really an expense. You're just, spending cash to buy land, which they're both assets. So we have ample fund balances. There's a great need to buy land to ensure that they don't get too expensive if you wait too long, and we might have to buy them anyway. But in terms of adverse reactions to the fact that we might be getting low on funds, we do not see that happening because we do have good reserves, and we have analyzed those reserves to ensure that there's not going to be any near-term impact.
I appreciate that answer. And next time there's an accountant joke, please advise. Make sure to laugh appropriately.
That was not funny, right?
We'll get there one day.
Thank you, Councilmember.
They will never be funny.
Thank you, Councilmember Serrano. I cannot see the other council members who are virtually attending the meeting. So if you have any questions, please speak up. And if not, then I'm going to open this hearing. I'm going to open this public hearing for comments, and I will call upon the audience. And there's not many here tonight, but we'll have second call and the third call. Okay. So I'm going to close the public hearing, and now we'll ask for a motion from council.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance number 4559, adjusting the 2021-2022 biannual operating budget of the city of Pasco by providing supplement thereto, by appropriating revenue received in excess of estimated revenues for the current year, and by providing transfers and adjustments authority, and further authorize publication by summary only.
Okay, so there's been a motion to adopt ordinance number 4559. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Milne. And with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you. And next, we have another motion that we need to pass as well on the same topic.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance number 4560, adopting the City of Pasco, Washington Mid-Biennium Adjustment to Capital Projects Budget for the 2021-2022 biennium, and further authorize publication by summary only.
So there's a motion on the floor to adopt ordinance number 4560. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Serrano. So all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 4560 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, thank you, council members, for that, and staff. I know that's a big project, and appreciate the presentations and the work that was put into this, so thank you very much. Next, we'll go on to the next on the agenda item for ordinances and resolutions not relating to hearings. And we have a resolution for the 2022 through 2027 Capital Improvement Plan. Director Richa, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this again is another topic that we've discussed for the last couple of weeks. And what's on your docket today has two changes, pretty minimal changes. One is inclusion of Peanuts Park North project, which is to the tune of about $500,000, as well as a change to schedule for Memorial Pool bubble roof. And we are moving that project from 2025 to 2023. And those are the only two changes to what the council has seen so far. And we view those as fairly minimal compared to the total capital improvement plan. And that is all I have to add, Mr. Mayor, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Director Richa. Once again, I'll ask any questions or comments from the council and in the audience, if there was to be any at this time. And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Absolutely, Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 4125, approving the capital improvement plan for calendar years 2022 to 2027.
Thank you. Now there's a motion on the floor to approve resolution number 4125. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilwoman Roach. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you. And next we have, well, it was Richa night last week, and let's just continue on to this week. So we have an ordinance amending PMC Chapter 3.35 Fee Summary Water Utility Rate Adjustments. Director Richa.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per council's direction, we are proposing the rate increases as shown in the ordinance for water and sewer services. Please keep in mind that this includes the $9 million utilized by the water projects of the Arpa funds. So you will see reduced increases to the rates to our community in this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And for any council members who have any questions or comments, I'll open the floor. And for any members of the audience, none seen at this moment. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Absolutely, Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance number 4561, amending Pasco Municipal Code sections 3.35.160 water utility and 3.35.170 sewer utility, and further authorize publication by summary only.
So there's the motion on the floor to adopt ordinance number 4561. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Melanie. So all those in favor of ordinance number 4561 signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda item is a resolution approving the 2022 through 2024 collective bargaining agreement with the Pasco Police Officers Association, uniformed employees. And I want to go ahead and open it up to Ms. Colleen. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am happy to be here to present to you a collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Pasco Police Officers Association, PPOA as we call them, that will expire. The current agreement expires in 2021, so we have been...
Excuse me, can I ask you to put on a mask, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the PPOA is a 78-member interest arbitration unit, and with a desire to maintain good relations and stability and certainty, the city and the union commenced bargaining for a successor agreement in October of this year. Those negotiations went well, and with a few contract modifications and economics bargained, we were able to come to an agreement with that group, and we met and did a tentative agreement on October 26th. The membership ratified that agreement on November 16th, so we're here to present that agreement to the council. Typically, we look at a CPI or Consumer Price Index when we're looking at bargaining, and in June to June of 2020 to 21, that percentage was 6%, and it's fluctuated between 5.7 and 6.3 since that time. So we have agreed to 2022 increase of 5%, and then we move forward to 2023, and we have a 100% of CPI with a minimum of 2.5%, with a maximum of 4.5%, and 1% increase in July of 2023. The same for 2024. We also had slight increases in other incentives for the bargaining unit, including detective incentive, bilingual incentive, and then we also added a incentive for shift differential for newly employed employees that usually would work graveyard or swing shift. So we've added that to the bargaining agreement as well. This agreement was bargained in good faith by management and the association and represents a fair and equitable settlement. Accordingly, we recommend that the council approve the collective bargaining agreement. And I've taken any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Yes, Councilwoman Roach.
I have a question about Article 19, the bilingual incentive. Is
Yes.
there a language assessment in place to assess that the individual is actually bilingual?
Yes, we do have a test that we set up through the state to determine if someone is bilingual in more than just Spanish. We also have had other languages where people are bilingual that are beneficial to the city.
Okay, just want to make sure that that was happening. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody else? Would Director Chapin, thank you very much for this report. So I'll entertain a motion if you're ready.
I am ready to motion this. I move to approve resolution number 4126, approving the 2022-2024 collective bargaining agreement with the Pasco Police Officers Association, uniform employees, and further authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
So there's a motion on the floor to approve resolution number 4126. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilwoman Roach. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign? Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you. Director Chapin, thank you so much, and the staff, City Manager Dave Zabel, and whoever else was involved. Chief Roski, please tell the police officers that not just our council, but the city is just overwhelmed with how great our police department is and have been to the community, and how they've responded to all the situations that have gone on over the past couple of years. You know, we try very hard to make it fair and just to be competitive with everywhere else. But most important, we just see the passion that and the skills and the reputation that the City of Pasco Police Department has throughout the state. I've been all over the state, and the Pasco Police Department is well recognized for many of the things that they've jump-started and things that they have done to improve the quality of life for our citizens in our community and the safety. And although we always have work to do, our officers are much appreciated, and I would just like you to extend that on behalf of the City Council, our thank you, and again, to the staff who have come to these agreements and continue to do good work for our community. So thank you very much, Chief Roski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and of course, thank you for your support and the council support. The officers feel it and certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next we'll move on to the ordinances, administrative, professional, and management wage and salary plans. City Manager Dave Zabel.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is our group, our non-represented group, which those are the folks that work in our offices, provide that administrative support, provide that professional support out there to a number of our classified and unclassified employees, information services, engineers, planners, folks like that, technicians. And then also includes our management group as well. And so similar to what you heard last week and then this evening with PPOA, typically we look at a COLA. We don't have formal negotiations necessarily with this group. It's really more of a, a market look and some internal discussions among some key staff that are tuned into that type of work. And so our proposal this year, it's a little bit less than the 6% COLA in terms of wage. The proposal's for a 4% wage increase effective the first pay period in January. And then also, as I shared with council last year, one of the benefits that we as a city have been a little bit dinged on with folks in this classification when we're talking about folks leaving for other competitive cities is deferred compensation. And so last year, council authorized a 1%, just kind of started a process, authorized a 1% deferred compensation for the employees in these two groups. And this year we're proposing to add to that it'd be a total of 2%. And I might be upfront with you. My plan is to probably come to you next year with making that a 3%. That kind of gets them a little bit more comparable to some of our other agencies, and then internal as well. So that is our proposal. The other thing I did want to mention is the management scale. Really, that is a maximum scale. And so, excuse me, that's a maximum scale. And you look at some of those numbers are rounded off. That is not just a 4% application there. So we looked at from a market perspective, top scale, where those are in some of the other agencies around that are competitive with us, because it's important that we maintain, good staff, and it's important that when we have openings, we attract good staff. So those were bumped up. Doesn't necessarily mean anybody's going up to the maximum. The only guaranteed, I would say it's even guaranteed, what the attorney said next to me. But, yeah, the idea is that most of the folks in these, most if not all the folks on the management scale can count on a 4% if it's approved by council. They could count on that 4%. There's other opportunities in terms of merit and performance that could bump them a little bit further along the scale as there is in the more formalized admin professional scale or some of the unionized scales. There's just not a step-by-step, you've been here 3 years, it's time to move to the next step kind of scale for management. Management is more of a, let's see how you're performing and we'll talk about salary. So basically that's our proposal. It's 4% plus the 1% additional 457 contribution.
All right, well, thank you for that, City Manager Dave Zabel. I'll open it up for questions or comments from council.
Yes, Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, Councilmember Maloney.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Martinez. I guess I'll make just a comment. I know that these numbers are much higher than we're used to seeing here at in Pasco, but I think when you look across the comparables, it's the inflation really is high, and it's affecting everyday people, including our staff. So it's unfortunate that we have to see numbers this high, but I think it's fair and reasonable to to make sure we're taking good care of our employees. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Maloney, and I echo the same sentiments there. Anybody else? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Absolutely. I move to adopt ordinance number 4562, providing for certain adjustments to the administrative, professional, exempt, and non-exempt wage plan beginning January 9, 2022, first full pay period of 2022, and further authorize publication by summary only.
Thank you. So there's a motion on the floor to adopt an ordinance number 4562. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Serrano. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously. And there's a second motion tied to this topic. Mayor Pro Tem Barajas.
I move to adopt ordinance number 4563, providing for certain adjustments in the management salary plan beginning January 9, 2022, first full pay period of 2022, and further authorize publication by summary only.
So there's a motion on the floor to adopt ordinance number 4563. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Milne. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you for that. Again, thank you, City Manager Dave Zabel and staff for all the work they do. And, I know that this council and hopefully future council will take into consideration all the good work that's been done and also reward where it's needed and perhaps, do what's right just to make sure we're competitive and we're taking care of our people. Thank you very much. Next, we have new business. We have approval for the DWSRF loan application for West Pasco Water Treatment Plant Improvement Project Phase. So tonight we have Steve Worley. Would you like to kick us off with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you very much. This item is to look for approval from council to submit a grant or a loan application, a grant application for the West Pasco Water Treatment Plant Phase 2 project. Council may recall, probably about a year ago, we came to council for the Phase 1 project, and we got approval to move forward with that, and now we are in the second phase. We feel like we have a pretty good chance of getting this grant awarded, given the fact that they awarded Pasco the first phase. And so as part of the grant application process, we are required to get formal approval by council to move this forward. And so happy to answer any questions related to this request.
Thank you, Director Worley. Any questions or comments from the council? Well, the word grant is always good,
Yes.
right? So, if you would like to entertain the motion?
I just wanted to say in the
I'm sorry.
report, sorry.
Oh, excuse me, it is
The
a
report says
loan.
loan, so.
Yes, I apologize.
Okay, just
Oh, so
clearing
loan.
that up.
So,
It's my bad.
okay, thank you
Okay.
for pointing that out, Councilwoman Roach.
There's a low-interest loan application.
Okay. All right, with that, entertain the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the submittal of a drinking water state revolving fund loan application for the West Pasco Water Treatment Plant Improvements Project Phase 2 for a loan amount up to 8.0 million plus 1% loan fee for a total of $8.08 million.
So there's a motion to approve the submittal of a drinking water state revolving fund loan application for the West Pasco Water Treatment Plant. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilwoman Roach. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you. So with that, comes to the end of the special meeting, and I will adjourn this meeting and move on to our city council regular workshop meeting.
Mayor, if I could.
Oh, yes, City Manager Dave Zabel?
So we have a little bit of an issue because our regular time doesn't start till 7, and
Oh,
council cruised through this pretty quickly.
okay.
And so if you look at the advertised time of the workshop, that's 7 PM.
Okay,
So I think we kind of have to take a recess and reconvene at 7.
okay, well, you know what,
So-
that sounds good. So with that, we have adjourned the special meeting, and we will reconvene at exactly 7 o'clock. So with that, we will recess until 7. Thank you.
there a musical cue?
Nope, not
Get
tonight.
off.
So
Get back to your seat.
it is now 7:00, and we are now entering our regular workshop meeting, and we've had an opportunity for housekeeping to ensure that everybody meets our mandate and compliance with the mask, and we're just gonna continue on with our regular workshop meeting. So with that, we will go to, skip over to item 4, and that is, verbal reports from council members. Is there any council members that would like to report anything that, on anything that they attended last week?
This is Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Martinez. So last week, the Pasco Public Facility District Board had their monthly meeting, and they have they're looking at pushing out slightly the ballot measure for the potential aquatic facility towards the end of April. They were feeling like February was going to be too fast to be able to get good solid information pulled together about not pros and cons, but just the factual information required for the public to make an informed decision on what that measure looks like. So they sounded very firm. I know there's been some delays in the past, and they were very loath to delay it again. But looking at the holidays and the schedule between now and what would be an early February election just was too crunched for their opinion. So, so more to come on that. There is no formal motion that they've passed to move forward on a ballot measure just yet, but I would expect that to be coming. I think they said early January they were intending to pass that measure. So, so that's where things are at on that. So that just want to give you all a heads up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Maloney, for that information. That actually was a topic that was brought up, and you answered my question, so thank you very much for attending that meeting and letting us know. Anybody else? If not, then we'll move right along for items of discussion tonight. And the first item for discussion is the Lewis Street Corridor update by Mackay, Sposito, and we will have Director Steve Orley start the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This item is being brought back to you again per the suggestion that staff made after the last presentation on this. There was a lot of discussion, and what I think we walked away from on the last meeting was council was leaning towards option 2, but I think there were still some questions about what the impacts of that were going to be in terms of bicycle routes on parallel streets, Clark and Columbia. And so staff offered to take some additional time and effort and work with the consultant to clarify some of the information related to that option and bring back to council some more information to help council make an informed decision. We also wanted to clarify in this presentation what the impact of the use of the existing sidewalks would be. I think the last presentation showed some great information about how we could use it during a festival type situation. But I think today we're going to show you some information about what those uses could look like in its normal operating uses, not just during a festival type situation. I also wanted to mention before we get started that the city staff has applied for a Complete Streets grant through several nonprofit organizations to get some additional funding for this corridor project. And that funding is going to help shore up some of the shortfall that we currently have in what is proposed. And in order to meet the criteria for that funding, we are required to follow our Complete Streets ordinance, and that is a requirement for this. And so I just wanted to keep that all in mind. This is a council decision as to which direction we'll go. We're happy to go with any direction the council would want. I just wanted to make sure that council has all the best information available in order to make an informed decision. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to John. You want to start us off?
Yeah, so my name is John.
Sorry, this is Councilmember Maloney. May I interrupt for a second?
Go ahead, Councilmember Maloney.
Yeah, I want to address council on this. So I've had an opportunity to review this, and I don't believe it meets the discussion that we had at our previous meeting. And I would like to consider whether or not we would like to rather than present this, which I think has some information that's going to be, well, we've already seen some emails saying that there's some downtown business owners that are pretty upset by what's being proposed here, and the lack of new information and options. So I would like to propose that we potentially table this and ask staff to come back with better information, providing some proposals as to how we could potentially work out a bike path, a dedicated bike lane somewhere in the downtown, as well as 20-foot sidewalks. Nothing in front of us in this packet provides that as any sort of option, which is what we as council, I believe, directed staff to do at our last meeting.
Okay, I'll ask you to just pause for a second. So, Councilmember Maloney, and this is for council, how do you feel about Councilmember Maloney's presentation or suggestion here? Okay, you know what, I'll start with, go ahead, Councilmember Sharani, what's your thoughts?
I'm going to direct my attention to Director Worley. I heard you say that we had already applied for grants based on some of these proposals. Is that correct?
The grants were not specific to which option. They're basically saying that we have a project that is going to meet our complete streets ordinance and will provide options for all right-of-way users, and that we would move forward with that funding application and use it to move this project forward.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're potentially hedging some funding, whether it's grant funding or our budgetary funding, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think we need to at least have the conversation.
I do too.
Okay, you feel the same way, Councilwoman Roach?
Yes, I definitely feel like we have to have the conversation and just the understanding that we've been committed as a city with a bicycle plan to implement bike lanes for, I don't know, close to a decade now. And that's slow to roll out, and here's an option to do so. I'd at least like to talk it through.
Okay. So I've heard three council members so far. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I'm in support of discussing further, see what the options are, and actually taking into consideration the businesses in downtown that are pushing for this and asking for viable traffic. Mm-hmm. So further discussion is due, and I'm in support of that.
Okay. And so Councilmember Maloney, you have some more thoughts?
Oh, sure. I will be happy to share them in detail at the end of this presentation then. Thank you.
Okay, so we will continue with the presentation, and, you know, if you can just be brief in the presentation, unless it's something really different from what was presented to us before, but also with the understanding that that there's something new that you're going to present, or you just reminding us of what was given to us?
There's new content.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and let's have the discussion, because that's all it is tonight at this workshop meeting, and that's what these meetings are for, is to discuss. And you know, there will be no decision made tonight, but it's good to get more information. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mm-hmm. Mayor and Council, we're here tonight to talk about the Lewis Corridor improvements from 2nd to 5th. We attended a workshop last month and received some feedback, and have gone back and worked with our design team to perform some additional analysis and present to be what we believe the engineering response to what we were tasked to do. And with me here is Jason.
Yeah, hi, Jason Irving, Mackay Sposito. I'm the project manager for the consultant team.
Next slide. We're going here. There you go. So at the workshop, we presented a number of different things. We showed a few different options for what this corridor may be in the long term, and we summarized the stakeholder engagement we've done to date, which, to briefly summarize, was 3 different methods: a physical door-to-door outreach walking along the corridor, a focus group of stakeholders, and an online survey that was advertised heavily by the city of Pasco, and then was filled out by Pasco residents and also members of the greater Tri-Cities area. We'll talk through with the direction we received from council and the additional analysis we've performed, the direction that we heard was that there's a high priority to provide businesses outdoor dining areas and to take this opportunity to provide that space long-term as the city grows. But we have to do that mindful that bikes need to go somewhere. We had just built, we're building an overpass with bike lanes. And if we build the next street without bike lanes or without complete streets, we need to figure out how to divert and redirect bike traffic safely to other areas of our bike network that are planned in our bike ped plan. So a couple of streets were kicked around as ideas, being Clark and Columbia, Clark to the north, Columbia to the south of Lewis. We'll talk through that. And then we'll talk through option 2 as we dug through a little bit more with these alternate bike routes, what it means if we put bikes on Lewis and what it means if we put bikes somewhere else. Nothing is free in the world, so there's consequences for having them on Lewis, there's consequences for having them somewhere else. And then also, we expanded our analysis to look at what businesses can do with 15 or 20-foot sidewalks given current code provisions, so that there can be a better understanding of what we're actually getting if we go with 20 feet versus 15 feet of sidewalk. So on the 25th, we presented 3 options and then a hybrid. Options 1 through 3 were shared with stakeholders, and option 1 was not preferred by any of the stakeholder groups, which was bike lanes outside vehicle travel lanes, but immediately adjacent to them. Stakeholder groups either preferred option 2 or 3, with usually a fairly close margin between those. And option 2 being bike lanes within the travel lane. So that would not necessarily be a complete street, which provides bikes for all, or bike lanes for all users with different capabilities and ages. That would be for somebody not with kids who could potentially keep up with traffic and navigate traffic situations safely. Option 3 would meet the complete streets criteria by providing a dedicated protected bike lane outside of the parallel parking. And staff had heard that there was a want to have the increased ability for the street to be used as a festival street. And so we created a hybrid option where we took the community preferred option, which is based off of the survey of Pasco residents at large, which was option 3, and we elevated that sidewalk to provide 20 feet of sidewalk space usable during outdoor festivals. So that sidewalk space could be used by vendors and stores and such, as opposed to having the curb disrupt that space. So those are the options we presented on the 25th. And then the direction that we heard was that the preference was to move forward with option 2, but what should we do with bikes? So if we end up with a solution that does not have complete streets on Lewis, where can we put bikes and what are the consequences of where those bikes end up, so that we can have a complete decision about what we want to do on Lewis, knowing what that means for other corridors, whether it's sidewalks or parking or costs, so we don't make one decision on Lewis and then regret that decision instantly the next time we do a project and we're worked into a corner we don't like. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Quick question. So you said that you were directed, direction for option 2, was that from the input that you got from the community during the meeting, or was that from staff, or who?
So we got the impression that the council members that spoke had a preference for option 2. It wasn't selected by council to proceed with it.
Okay.
But the preference from, I think, at least 3, maybe 4 council members was that option 2 was, seemed attractive, but it's not yet a fully completed thought, because what do we do with bikes and how does that work? Where would they go? So that's what we had, okay. That's what our takeaway was from that meeting.
Thank you. Sorry.
Great, good evening. So we'll talk a little bit about the feasibility assessment we completed to look at Clark and Columbia as alternate bike routes. So you'll see a few things on this slide here. The first is the light blue lines, which are the highlighted preferred routes for pedestrians and bicycles established in the city's 2011 Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan. So those are really the long-term priorities for where the city had planned for bikes and peds to go in that master plan. And you'll see the red dashed line, which is a possible alternative for routing bicycles from the new overpass westbound. and then you'll see a dark blue line there on Columbia Street, which is an alternative route for bikes on Columbia Street. So, and we'll talk through kind of the pros and cons of each of those as part of this presentation. So starting with Columbia Street, I might step back. So Columbia and Clark have pretty similar existing conditions for the most part from 2nd to 5th. They vary a little bit as you go west of 5th. But ultimately, Columbia Street, we determined was not a preferred bicycle route for a few reasons. One of those being is 10th Avenue is a T intersection as it travels west at 10th. So it doesn't connect quite as far to the west as Clark does, and so it doesn't provide that same level of connectivity. As you can see in this photo here too, this is I guess this is just west of 10th Avenue on Columbia at that intersection. You'll notice that the pavement and the right-of-way width begins to narrow, and that creates a real challenge for incorporating bike lanes through this area on Columbia. You'll see the railroad to the left there, and then again, just the lane widths and the existing right-of-way width just doesn't really allow for bicycles without pretty significant construction costs that would include relocating the curb, sidewalk, and possibly some right-of-way acquisition. And then finally, safety for bicyclists to get back to Lewis Street. As you all know, 10th Avenue is a pretty busy roadway, and it also has limited width, so not a great option for getting those bicycles back up to Lewis. So now we'll talk about Clark Street, which really, based on our review, would be a preferred route over Columbia Street for a number of reasons. And we'll look at a couple of different kind of solutions. So first, a short-term solution, which would allow for bicycles to be incorporated on Clark Street with just a restriping project. And then we also consider a longer-term solution, which, similar to Lewis Street in the future, if there was a street improvement project for Clark, how would those bicycle lanes fit within that corridor? So starting out on Clark from 2nd to 5th, you'll notice the existing section on the left here. So the existing condition consists of a parallel parking lane on the north side, 2 13-foot travel lanes, 1 in each direction, and then angled parking on the south side. I just want to stop and note that the current parking stalls, both the parallel and angled parking, are undersized and they don't meet the typical city's design standards for parking. So regardless of what is done to incorporate bikes on Clark Street, if there's a project there, that would be the likely opportunity to upsize those lanes, those parking aisles to meet current standards. So the proposed section on the right, you'll see there's a 6-foot bike lane in each direction. The parallel parking on the north is maintained. There's still one travel lane in each direction, slightly narrowed, but still within design standards. But the big impact here is the loss of parallel parking. That parallel parking on the south side, or excuse me, the angled parking on the south side would need to be converted to parallel parking. And so there'd be approximately loss of 40 parking stalls, or about 1/3 of the parking, from 2nd to 5th on Clark. So just within that 3-block section.
And there's also the sidewalk width as well.
Under this scenario, this would be just a restriping project, but yes, on the next one for sure. Yeah, so this would be kind of the lower cost option without having to reconstruct the curbs and the sidewalks, new pavement and all that, just purely restriping. And then this is just a higher level picture of highlighting where those angled parking impacts would be. So again, that 3-block section from 2nd to 5th on Clark Street. And so as I mentioned, we also looked at the kind of long term, right? So if there's a future project on Clark similar to Lewis that really goes through upgrading all the sidewalks, curbs, pavement, and gives you some flexibility on where those things go when you're reconstructing them, that's what this option looked like. And we really focused here on what can we do to maintain as much parking as possible while still getting those bike lanes in there. And that's based on both previous feedback from the public as well as current about the importance of parking downtown, right? We all know that parking is a big item downtown. So you'll see on the right here, again, 6-foot bike lanes each direction, parallel parking on the north side is maintained, two travel lanes, 1 in each direction, and a slight modification to the angled parking. It's currently, you'll see the angle's just a little bit different. That angle's now changed from a 60 to a 30-degree angle. Which does, the result of that is some loss in parking, but a little bit less than that previous example. And really what's driving that change in angled parking is the need to fit all of these elements within the existing right-of-way. Because similar to Lewis, you're working building to building in a lot of places. So what you end up here with, though, is really the big, in addition to the loss of 20 parking stalls, a narrower sidewalk. So we're currently working with 15-foot sidewalks on both the north side and south side of the roadway in the existing condition. That sidewalk would need to be narrowed down to somewhere from 8 to 10 feet. So essentially, you're kind of trading that 20-foot sidewalk on Lewis a little bit potentially for some reduced sidewalk width on Clark to the north.
And there had been previous,
No, go ahead, please.
there had been some previous council input to make sure that when we looked at downtown, we didn't just look at Lewis Street, but we thought long-term that the city may expand and grow, and if it tried to grow outside of Lewis, to take that into account and hopefully build the city in such a way that we wouldn't restrict that development by how we build it. So we feel that if we were to put the bikes on Clark and long-term go through a vitalization project similar with Lewis, really spruce it up and make it nice, the result would be something that wouldn't have enough sidewalk width for the sort of business that we see happening on Lewis. So it would be more commercial activity, not storefronts, not restaurants. And so right now we're in a situation where we're looking at two competing corridors, and there's a certain amount of space and a certain uses. And right now Lewis has two parallel parking areas, and Clark has parallel and angled parking. So there's more space demands on Clark because of the angled parking. If we also put bikes on Clark, Clark would bear the burden of the angled parking and the bikes, and Lewis would have extra wide sidewalks. So it would create a downtown feel where Lewis would have extra accommodations and Clark would have reduced accommodations for future development.
No, that's a good clarification. Thank you, John.
Yeah, excuse me, we have a good
So I
question.
have a
Sure.
quick question, and I'm not sure if it's for you or Mr. Director Worley. Does complete streets require that people get from A to Z, or does it require bicycle traffic down a specific street?
Complete Streets is a program that looks at the use of public right-of-way for all users. And so it could be either. It basically says any project that a city does, they will look at all of the users of the right-of-way to ensure that everybody is accommodated. So does it all have to be accommodated in the same area? Not necessarily.
But we probably would need to do something on Clark if we were to maintain eligibility for that funding, which would be the short-term solution of striping and 40 parking stalls.
So,
lost.
if I may, it seems to me that parking is always going to be our issue. So this is not a question for you, but more over here. Is there property in downtown that we could either procure through acquisition or condemnation that would settle a parking garage? And I don't need an answer now, but I think that's something we want to prioritize, either acquire, or if there's something sufficiently dilapidated that's problematic, a chronic nuisance, as our code provides, that we could acquire through condemnation, we ought to strongly consider this. I know that's not a friendly term, but we need to think about this. If parking is going to consistently be our issue, as a council, we need to come to a solution that allows for complete streets so we can get grant funded and have safe pedestrian access and promote our businesses, but we also need parking, and we can't just make that up. So it seems to me that our solution is to find property to purchase or condemn.
Did he answer your question? Okay, all right.
Right. Thank you. So we discussed a little bit about the parking and or sidewalk impacts from 2nd to 5th on Clark. The situation's a bit improved as you move west of 5th all the way down to 14th. So you'll see on the left here is the existing section where there's parallel parking on each side of the roadway and then 4 travel lanes total, 2 in each direction. So in order to incorporate bike lanes on Clark Street from 5th to 14th, we'd need to do essentially what you would call a road diet. You guys may be familiar with that term, where you'll see the proposed section on the right? You still have your 2 parallel parking lanes. You've now added a 6-foot bike lane in each direction, but rather than having 4 travel lanes, that gets now reduced down to 3 travel lanes, where you have 1 in each direction and a 2-way center left turn lane. So this would also be a restriping project. There may be some other things that we would need to look at, including some potential signal modifications at 10th to make sure that those signal heads align with the new travel lanes and the signal functions correctly for bikes, peds, and vehicles. But this is a solution for 5th Avenue to 14th on Clark for just merely restriping to get those bike lanes incorporated. So in summary, the feasibility assessment we completed, it identified Clark as a better bicycle route than Columbia. There would be some potential loss of parking stalls, anywhere from 20 to 40. And then in the 20 stall loss configuration, so that long-term option, there would also be potentially a reduction in sidewalk width. A road diet could be completed from 5th to 14th to get the bicycles incorporated, but all of this would require a bit of additional analysis, public engagement, and design. For example, the analysis would need to be completed for that road diet to make sure that that roadway still operates efficiently with those lane reductions. Public engagement would need to be completed. With Lewis, with the current Lewis project, there's been, community-wide as well as very focused feedback received through door-to-door work on the Lewis corridor. We would imagine performing that same level of door-to-door engagement with the businesses and residents on Clark to understand how they feel about the project. And then obviously some additional design work would be needed to be completed. So now we'd like to talk a little bit about business use of public sidewalks. That was an identified priority at the last council meeting. We know that's important to the downtown businesses in the community. So currently there's pretty limited use of sidewalks by the businesses downtown. You'll see the picture in the bottom right. That's just an example. But there's not a lot of, seating tables, lots of things out, goods for sale on the sidewalks. There's just not a lot of use currently. And based on the public engagement the information we collected, there's a few reasons potentially for that. And the first is just perhaps a bit of a misunderstanding of code and what's allowed on those sidewalks. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We heard some concern about added costs of staff to not only serve those tables and chairs, but also oversee some of those goods while they're out on the sidewalk. And that's in line with the third bullet there, the potential for theft. We did hear some concern for, whether it's produce or clothing or whatever, if those goods were put out on the sidewalk, there's some concern about theft or having to staff additional people to kind of oversee those things. And then through the public engagement, what we heard about future use was there was 7 existing businesses that expressed some level of interest in establishing outdoor dining. And of course, as the downtown develops and new businesses come in and there's development, that may change as well. But a little bit about allowable uses and code restrictions. So currently, there's a limitation on the outdoor seating can be 25% of the indoor seating capacity. Of course, that can change over time. The downtown master plan that the city is currently working through, that will revisit some of those code requirements. Also, liquor sales would require establishment of permanent fencing for any businesses wanting to sell liquor. There's a 6-foot wide pedestrian area that must be maintained, so there need to be some enforcement to make sure those tables and chairs or whatever goods are being placed on the sidewalk aren't encroaching on that 6-foot wide sidewalk area to allow pedestrians to pass. And then if there is interest by businesses in selling goods out on the sidewalk, there is a limited duration permit that's required. In addition to insurance, the business must provide proof insurance to the city or a release of liability. So we'll just walk you through now a couple of examples and some graphics showing what a 15 and 20-foot sidewalk might look like as far as restaurant use, table use, outdoor seating. So this is just the existing condition, 15-foot sidewalk, not a lot of street furniture and that type of thing out in the corridor currently. And the same photo in the bottom right there that's just kind of indicating a bit of limited use currently for the businesses on the sidewalk. So with the 15-foot sidewalk option, this kind of shows a couple of things here. One, you'll see on the left where there's two tables kind of wide from the building. And in this scenario, there's a 9-foot seating zone and a 6-foot pedestrian zone. And what allows for this increased space under a 15-foot sidewalk is carefully selecting where the street furnishings go, where they're placed along the corridor. So you see on the right where we have an example of a bench, there's trees, lighting, right? There's lots of different furnishings that go in that 3-foot furnishing zone right next to the curb. Those items can be eliminated where there's like a restaurant use and needs more space on that sidewalk. Not eliminated, but kind of strategically placed to the side of that business. And then again, on the right, you can see there's still seating available when those furnishings are present. It's just a little bit reduced. But under this scenario, there's still a 6-foot pedestrian zone provided. And as you can see, you know, there's quite a bit of seating space if the business should desire that. And then under the 20-foot sidewalk option, you can see there's still plenty of space for a couple of tables and some chairs. I think the added benefit here is greater flexibility with where your trash cans, your benches, street trees, lighting, that type of thing. You can still place those adjacent to that outdoor seating and have plenty of space for 6 feet for your pedestrians. The one concern we want to bring up here, and we'll show you in some kind of example photos for the other cities, which I'm sure you've seen in the packet, is the risk of oversizing the sidewalks. There is the potential to create kind of an empty, vacant feel downtown if too much sidewalk space is provided that's not efficiently used. So we talked a little bit about 7 businesses indicating that they would perhaps look at future outdoor seating if in the future of their business. So that's, you know, a fairly small percentage of the overall businesses downtown. And again, that definitely could change over time. But part of a vibrant, energetic downtown is, you know, we want the hustle and bustle down there, people moving around, people shopping. And if there's too much space there, it can create that kind of empty feel. And we discussed in October, really, right, in these revitalization projects, there's limited space. We have to be very good stewards of the real estate that we have down there. So just want to be aware. And we'll show you some examples here again of some other cities. Go ahead, John.
And so an interesting thing to look at is if we go back and forth between these slides a couple times, so the cost of potentially 40 parking stalls in the short term on Clark and potentially 20 parking stalls in the long term is this extra couple table spots at a few locations along 2nd to 5th. So really in terms of the trade-off, we haven't done the outreach, so we don't know what stakeholders would say due to outreach results, but I would be surprised if we balanced the need for 40 parking stalls versus a small number of businesses having a little bit more seating flexibility, based off of the feedback that the city has gotten in the past on the significance of parking. We would advise based off of our experience that taking away parking might have a lot bigger holistic impact between multiple streets in the city than providing the 15-foot sidewalks. Just something to keep in mind as we roll forward.
So here's some examples of some other cities, their sidewalk widths and kind of how they've been utilized. So this one in the upper left here, Unknown City, 20-foot sidewalk, but you'll see space to fit their street furnishings, trees, and lighting. You still have your pet area, and they're able to fit a couple of tables with some chairs for outdoor seating. And then in the upper right here, nearby Walla Walla, Washington, a little hard to see the details in that photo, but it's a similar situation as the one in the upper left, where they're able to fit all those components into that 20-foot sidewalk. And then as you get down to the Boise, Idaho photo, that's a 16-foot sidewalk. A little bit different configuration. You'll see the businesses or the tables and chairs up tight to the business. They've kind of mixed their trees and their bicycle racks in a little bit different configuration, but still providing the space needed for all those users. And I want to stop too and just kind of note that Walla Walla, Boise, and I believe likely the city in the upper left, they're all a little bit different look and feel than downtown Pasco. They're 6, 7, 8-story buildings in some cases, a little bit more urbanized feel. Not that that's not where downtown Pasco might be in the future, but just again, kind of just setting that look and feel. And then Washougal, Washington, at the bottom right, This is a project I worked on a few years back, and you'll see there's 12-foot sidewalks. And that business there was able to get some picnic tables outside to serve some more people at their restaurant. And then here's a few more examples of some other cities in Washington. These all happen to be 12-foot sidewalks, but we've got Camas, Edmonds, Richland, and Stevenson, all providing seating, outdoor seating in a little bit different configuration. The one that I feel is really interesting is Richland here in the bottom left. Where you'll see those tables and chairs, instead of being up tight to the building, are pushed out now into the street furnishing zone, and that pushes that 6-foot ped zone up tight to the buildings. Just a little bit different option. It's kind of nice. It gets the pedestrians closer to the doorways, to the businesses they're trying to access.
So we took a hard look at it, and our sometimes uncomfortable job of being a project manager or Jason being a consultant is to make sure people are well informed of the decision that they're headed towards. So we heard a general preference for option 2 from some council members. We didn't receive direction to charge forward with that, but based off the additional analysis we were asked to perform, the results of that showed some impacts of moving forward with option 2 we wanted to make sure council was aware of, so that when we proceed down that road, we don't essentially over prioritize the current project at the expense of future projects. It's really easy to do that sometimes because we always want the best for the current project that we're working on, but sometimes then later we realize we didn't make the best decision. So in the short term, like Mr. Worley mentioned, there's the potential compromised pursuit of funding if we don't provide complete streets. So if we went with Lewis with option 2, we would need to do something to make Clark to complete that complete streets package using Clark. So we would lose those parking stalls in the short term and have the cost of that project as well. It doesn't meet Pasco's planning and policy documents, which there's a traditional path where there's a plan developed, and then based off that plan, we start to budget for projects, and then we build a project. And if we never circle back, we don't start to break those very holistically developed plans. But Lewis was identified as a bike corridor in a number of different planning documents, and so it's a little bit tricky at this point in the process to start deferring those bikes to alternate routes without really taking a big step back at the overall bike network in Pasco and making sure we're not breaking things that way. So it's a little bit of a tricky situation to be in, and we're doing the best we can to navigate it. One of the things we were concerned about was reduced bike and ped safety. Usually the most direct route is the preferred route for a cyclist. So if we have alternate detour routes around downtown, a number of cyclists will probably just go straight through the light after the overpass and end up in traffic or on the sidewalk and kind of trying to navigate it however best they can. So that would be a reduction in safety. And then also the majority of residents, and I say that carefully because we had a few different stakeholder groups, if you recall. There's residents in general, stakeholders along Lewis and a few key stakeholders and a stakeholder group, and then also door to door. The majority of the citizens in Pasco wanted option 3. Most of the businesses, if you look at the business results, there was really close results between 2 and 3. And the highest priority was bike ped safety, which we felt moving forward with option 2 wasn't in alignment with the highest number of people who had responded to our outreach. Long term, we anticipate that businesses that are connected with bicycle networks will see an increase in revenue. So our goal is to provide good enough complete streets that as the bicycle network in the Tri-Cities area develops, the businesses can have the benefit of that. Probably the biggest impact that we saw from option 2 in the short term would be the loss of parking and sidewalks. That in this tug of war between adjacent corridors and adjacent space demands, that option 2 felt like it was letting Lewis win that tug of war at the detriment of Clark. So in terms of property values on Clark and long-term development on Clark, option 2 seems to do harm to Clark, maybe disproportionate for the gains we were making on Lewis. But that's a fairly complex weighing decision to figure out. There would also be additional short-term costs associated with furnishing Clark to accommodate bike lanes. It also doesn't directly connect to the Lewis Street overpass if we did option 2. We'd have to come off of the overpass and immediately divert bikes around downtown Pasco instead of through it. Yeah, absolutely.
Option 3 had only 15-foot sidewalks, correct?
That's correct. So there's a couple next steps, and we're here to support council in whatever way they need in terms of providing additional analysis or looking into additional alternatives. We want to be seen as council's tool in that respect. So there's a couple things we need direction on, and one is if we should proceed with the perception that we should have bikes on Lewis and design in that respect, or if we should say we should put bikes on Clark, which was the alternate to Lewis in our analysis for streets around Lewis that were eligible to be bike routes. So those are, in our eyes, those are the two viable options. There's pros and cons to each. We would need direction on which one of those to move forward on. And then in the short term, Jason and his team are ready to move forward with design as soon as we tell them which cross-section to use for Lewis Street. So that we need to make that bigger decision about where we need to put bikes, and then that helps feed the decision about what section we should use on Lewis. And our target again was to hit the summer of next year construction window, which at least one of our funding sources may be, that would be one of their requirements. So with that being said, that was a lot of information dumped on council, and we're here to field any questions.
But that was very helpful, so thank you very much. Any questions or comments from council?
This is Councilmember Maloney.
Okay, Councilmember Maloney, go ahead.
And I defer to my other council member colleagues if they want to weigh in first.
Do you want to weigh in first? No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Martinez. I have a lot to say on this subject, as I kind of prefaced earlier, and I've sent some emails over to staff as well as had some conversations. And basically, I'll be honest, I'm really disappointed in the staff report and the consultant report tonight. Basically, if you take a high-level look at what this document says, is in essence that the options that were provided to council previously are the only options and only viable options to go forward with. Now, it doesn't look at, for example, I mean, there's a ton of opportunities that, you know, I'm no traffic planner, I'm not an engineer or anything, but I do, however, I mean, like, for example, look at the possibility of, you know, removing parking from Lewis Street. You know, is that an option that we could use to, you know, provide some, you know, bike options downtown? That's not something that's listed. Like Councilmember Serrano mentioned earlier, of, you know, looking at the possibility and the need for a more permanent parking facility in there and what that would look like. I fully agree with his assessment. That this, unfortunately, I think that this response that we're seeing tonight, in essence, justifies the previous conclusions that staff and the consultant had raised, in spite of business objections and council objections to needing the additional space in our downtown corridor for sidewalks, when we're looking forward at you know, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to revitalize our downtown. For us to dismiss the business owners as being somewhat interested in establishing, you know, downtown outdoor or space, I think is insulting. Repeatedly, we've heard from those downtown businesses that they've tried to make that work, and you will say confused. I think that's being generous, but they feel like they were being very misled by city staff as to what outdoor seating they could even have today. I believe that we'll see a number of those businesses convert over to restaurant type space if we have adequate and ample space for them for you know, business owners to sit. I think we're creating a false dichotomy when we're looking at Clark as the only space for parking. The suggestion that we need to reduce, that we have the same exact right of way on Clark as we do on Lewis Street. The suggestion that somehow we need to keep angled parking on Clark Street at the expense of removing sidewalks down to 8 feet is laughable. Honestly, I think it's insulting to suggest that that is the only way that we can maintain parking and ample use of Clark, when ultimately, I think in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to see Clark and Columbia become very similar to Lewis Street in terms of the amount of businesses and amount of business traffic that we'll see. We expect, with the investments we're making in our downtown and the enthusiasm our downtown business owners and community have, that we're going to see expansions on that. So again, I think some of these things they're pretty disingenuous. I think we're looking at short-term benefits in terms of, you know, some potential revenue opportunities for grants, but there's going to be grants available in the future as well. We're looking at being driven by the Lewis Street overpass as our timing, but there's opportunities for example, to continue on the improvements later, perhaps what the right alternatives, wait for our master planning to be done, so we can have a better idea of what our downtown needs to look like long term. The code requirements that were brought up as potential restrictions on outdoor space, that's entirely a legacy item that we as council have full control over. It's in our city code, and even down to requiring insurance and a temporary permit for outdoor dining. Those are not awesome things and those things will need to be updated well. Entirely within our control as well. So we've already seen several emails from our downtown business owners, including 2 of our members of the DPDA, our Downtown Pasco Development Authority, that also find that this presentation is not matching at all what they're looking for, and that the proposed alternatives is insufficient for their business needs. So we're already seeing that response and backlash. I can go on, and let me just check my notes real quick to make sure that I'm not restating any of myself. But I'll say that when I look at those 20-foot sidewalks, when I think about the walkability of downtown Walla Walla, which is somewhere where we have people, leaving Tri-Cities to drive all the way to Walla Walla just to experience their downtown, to suggest that that's not good enough for us, that somehow we as a city can't support that sort of look in support of that direction. I think that's frankly insulting. So when I look at some of these things and I look at what we have in front of us, I do not support any of the options in front of us. And I look to our consultants and our staff who are trained in this sort of development to tell us, how do we best solve these problems holistically? I do not have all the answers. I know this, but I can think of answers and additional suggestions about things we can look at that I expect the creativity of our staff to be able to help address, so that we don't have someone like me that having to come up with all the solutions for how we can do this. And this is all in support of our downtown business owners and downtown business community that we, again, are suggesting and putting in front of a plan that frankly does not respect their desires, their demands, and the investments we're making in the downtown. So I guess I don't really have any questions. I'm just pretty pissed off, I'll be honest. So thank you.
Thank you,
This is
Councilmember.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Yes, Councilmember Alvarado, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I think certain sentiments I can certainly mirror and as shared by Councilmember Maloney. I think perhaps it seems to me that our current zoning and our current standards maybe are crutches that allow us to create something that may be a little bit more perhaps different than what we've seen. I think that as Councilmember Maloney mentioned, Walla Walla, that was a big shift. But this idea of having parklets and using CARES dollars to help restaurants and wineries and folks like that create these parklets, that using CARES dollars to be able to help them provide this was pretty amazing. But I think in our current code we can't do that. So I think I would love to also see some suggestions about, is there any codes that we need to readdress in our in our code? Is there anything that we need to look at to be able to be more creative? And is this why we have a very not as creative of a perhaps a problem solving in these issues? So those are my comments. I think that I'd be willing to support this with some added options if those become available.
Thank you, Councilmember Alvarado. Mayor Pro Tem Barajas.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a simple question. Something that's been brought up throughout the whole presentation was parking space, parking loss. Do we currently have, and I think this question is for Chief, do we currently have enforcement on parking?
Yeah, we have the parking ordinance, and our officers have specific parking tickets that aren't associated with the uniform traffic code that they can cite directly into municipal court. It is something that is lower in the initial priority, so it goes through the process of obviously in progress calls first, and then they do get to those parking complaints, and we write a fair number of parking tickets across the city.
A follow-up question, is there a way to get a report or some type of graphic that shows if that parking is by tenants, by merchants?
I'm not sure we would have that data. We would have raw data of the number of tickets, locations,
Right.
and what they are. I'm not sure we could tell
Just-
you.
Right, just really to see the use of the actual parking in that particular corridor.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could tell who
You're right.
are residents, who aren't, but.
Thank you, appreciate your response.
Councilwoman Roach.
I'm just thinking about the corridor here and the couple of blocks on the west side of the Lewis Street overpass, and wanting to know if staff knows how many of those businesses are restaurants. Do we know a number of how many? Because they're not just, I'm thinking out loud, and not all of those businesses are restaurants. Not all of them need 20 foot of clearance. And so that's another thought. And a lot of them, you know, I'm sensitive to business owners and them making a living, but simultaneously, I feel like they're one stakeholder group. And there's other stakeholders in this area. I don't want to make a decision that might be detrimental to development on Clark or Columbia, or for that matter, reducing the existing parking that we have. And so, I mean, I'm kind of interested in knowing why Councilmember Maloney or even Ruben or Councilmember Alvarado or not, you know, does option 4 appeal to you? I mean, that's a 20-foot sidewalk availability for street festivals. Yeah, what's the opposition to that?
It's Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, Councilmember Maloney.
Yeah, so Councilmember Roach, so the thing is, when you look at that option, the extra 5 feet are dedicated bike lane. So we're talking about a few times a year that would be useful for anybody, for, you know, setting up, for actually the businesses adjacent to that to be able to use that space. If you want to talk about what would look empty, it's the fact that we really don't have bike traffic in downtown right now. A lot of the stakeholders that you're hearing from and that we heard from in the survey, I actually know a bunch of them by name. I'm friends with some of them on Facebook. And there was a big push in the community of, we'll say, bicycle enthusiasts who were really interested in, you know, they support the idea of bikeable, you know, downtowns and community, which I also support. I've been vocal in my support in that in the past. But the key is here, I think that we need to have an option that can be supportive of both the businesses and the bike community. And right now, I do not believe that any of the options in front of us satisfy that. So when we look at, option 4, it is functionally a 15-foot sidewalk space. So just like option 1 or option 3, I believe. So option 2 is the only one that says actually has a 20-foot sidewalk. And in that space, it of course co-locates the bicycles and the automobiles, which is something that obviously we want to avoid for safety and practical purposes. Did that answer your question as to what I'm thinking?
Yeah, it does help, and I appreciate that you have personal relationships in this. I think that one of the things for me is that, is for the past decade, hearing people who do cycle around Tri-Cities, who do want bike lanes but don't have access, that is a stakeholder, in my opinion, that's not represented right now. That's not being represented in council voice, and I think the heavy weight is put on those. The stakeholdership is on the business owners, which I understand. It's a livelihood impact, but we're also considering future development. So I just want to be sure that option 2 is not ideal to me at all. And I just came back from Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I saw option 3 in person and was keenly watching to see what happens. And they've figured it out there how to use it. It does look awkward to just have kind of a parking stall right there as somebody who hasn't seen it before. But I'm in favor of keeping some type of bike lane on Lewis Street, because I just think You know, the kiddos that I used to teach at Pasco High and New Horizons, they would use that underpass and they would walk it, they'd bike it. Well, they'd bike along with traffic because there was no bike lane. And so we're eliminating access, we're not even considering access for a whole group of people by saying, you know, number 2 or you know, 20-foot sidewalk and not, you know, no bike lanes on Lewis. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Councilwoman Roach.
Councilmember Roach, just to be clear, I apologize if I misspoke. I am in favor of potentially bike lanes down Lewis Street or down one of the immediate adjacent streets as part of this. But I guess the potential sacrifice might be parking instead along Lewis Street, the parallel parking on there. So I'm certainly in favor of street connectivity of our bicycles from our the Oregon Avenue area, the eastern portion of our city to the rest of our city. That's, I guess, if I gave a suggestion or impression that I did not, I apologize for that.
And this is Alvarado.
Yes, Councilman. Go ahead.
In my mind, from where I'm sitting from my vantage point, it seems to me that being able to go with, in my opinion, option 1 with the opportunity for parklet development on certain specific strategic areas where there could be restaurants or folks that could use that seating, and to sacrifice parking for seating as an exchange for that, but still maintain the bike lane, still maintain adequate sidewalks and the single pedestrian. That would be my suggestion. I don't think that was an option that perhaps they were presented. Even that the parklets exist and they could be an option and be able to have these platforms that they can have seating on.
That's a good point, Councilmember Alvarado. And that wasn't an option that could be presented. I would just like, and again, this is a workshop and it's constructive criticism, and appreciate your comments, Councilmember Maloney. And the way that I see this is it's really difficult because I think that Mackay, Sposito, and the staff, you know, it's also a financial issue. You know, we're already just slightly underfunded for this project with the grant. So, and just hear me out for a second. You know, if Councilmember Maloney, if you were looking for maybe more options, such as what Councilmember Serrano said, hey, you know, maybe we need to purchase a piece of property on one of the streets, build a big parking lot, and that way we can have the 20-foot sidewalks and have all the things we want. That would take another, who knows how many years to be able to get to the point to be able to do that. And so, you know, time is of the essence here. I'm totally aware, and I feel for the businesses downtown because they've been waiting for so long. They want this, and they should have it because this is their properties, their businesses we're talking about. And how do you fit this all in together? I'm under the impression that the contractor and the staff are just trying to make it work where all these things come together, and they provided us the options that they couldn't at the moment. So again, we don't have to agree to any of these options, but that's why we're here today for comments such as yours, Mr. Maloney, to say, okay, you're not happy with this. We're not ready for this. I'm kind of struggling because I really want something to happen bad real soon for our business owners, and the more we add to what we want, such as a big, beautiful parking lot, it's just going to take more years to, you know, it's going to prolong this project more years. But I also, and the other thing that I wanted to make a note of is that we can choose not to put the bike lanes in, but then we don't meet the qualifications for the grant money, therefore we're going to have to find that out of the pockets or the budget of our city. And so all those things come into play. I'm still struggling, and I still need some more time to really, you know, get with the business owners and see how it is that we can make it work So, I personally, I wanna see a wall-to-wall street here. That's my option, and that's why I liked option two, because of the amount of, I know it's not the safest option, but because of the amount of bike traffic that we currently have, it would only make sense to somehow, maybe with arrows or something in the streets. I mean, because I see in option two, I see that it's, there's some like painted things in the road that it's a bike lane, is what I'm seeing here in this slide that I'm seeing here. So that would, the only issue with that is I don't know if that would qualify for the grants that we're applying for. So, but I just think this community, like Mr. Maloney said, we go all the way. I go to Walla Walla once a month to go have breakfast at the Maple Counter or at the Eggs and Bacon, whatever it's called. I mean, it is just an awesome place, and that option right there for the Walla Walla Street is what I would like to see in our downtown Pasco. But again, I mean, we have to consider the financial implications that we have here. So, anyway, those are just my thoughts. City Manager Dave Zabel, I see you have your lights on.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess just a couple thoughts. On the funding, we're about half funded. So we're, depending on what estimate you look at and you put the soft costs in there, we're somewhere between 1.8 and 2.4 million dollars funded. And Director Worley talked a little bit about some grant opportunities out there. I'll note of the money we have right now, it's all city money, with the exception of $200,000 of state money. So I don't like saying this, but the worst case scenario is you're going to lose a few $100,000 of state money right now if you sit on this, and you lose the opportunity to apply for grants. The problem I'm seeing as we're having this conversation and it starts to unfold is we're looking at the finer points of designing a corridor in the middle of a downtown where we're 6 months from having a comprehensive look at our downtown plan that's going to actually address a lot of these kind of issues and how it all fits together. So we're trying to develop and design and decide on a corridor now. Maybe it's a project a little bit ahead of its time. Maybe it makes sense to pause this for a bit and finish the downtown plan. And I know I didn't get a chance to talk to Steve about this earlier, and he's looking at me. I'm glad he's wearing a mask. Gives him some freedom. But maybe that's what we're struggling with here. It seems like is, we talked a little bit about parking, and we've had some discussions about, opportunities for perhaps some off-street parking downtown through one process or another. Although I know from talking to business owners throughout my career, there's nothing more premium than a parking spot in front of your business. Having a parking spot 2 or 3 blocks away really is not a good substitute for losing it on your business. And we look at the width of Lewis Street there, you can have 40 feet of sidewalks and 16 feet of parking and 24 feet of lanes. That's 80 feet. Or you can have, as Councilmember Maloney talked about, you could have 20-foot sidewalks, no parking, bike lanes, and adequate travel lanes. So those are the two choices. I don't think there's a scenario where you can get bike lanes, 20-foot sidewalks, parking, and travel lanes. I suppose there's no travel lane alternative, but that's probably not very viable. So, we did not present a proposal to remove all the parking on Lewis because I think it's pretty predictable how the business, it's probably worth a discussion, and we've had that tonight. I think if that would have been in the form of a slide from staff and had that kind of weight of a true proposal, we might have raised the ire unnecessarily of our business owners downtown. I think just talking about it seems adequate. It really comes down to weighing bike lanes with parking. Those are the two choices you have if you want 20-foot sidewalks on each side of the street. So I guess my thinking after all that, maybe some perhaps circuitous comments is maybe we need to see a little bit better how the whole downtown fits together through our comprehensive planning process down there before we make permanent plans that we're all going to live with for 50 to 80 years when we build this. ahead of that. So just a few thoughts to share with the council, because I'm not sensing a gelling on any particular option tonight, yeah.
Thank you for that, City Manager Dave Zabel, and I agree with you. And again, this is something that we might need a little bit more time, but time is of the essence, you know. So, Councilmember Serrano.
Is there not a way to do like a 4.0, which is consolidating several options? For example, if it's certain portions, option 4 makes the most sense. In other portions, I mean, I think really realistically, if you're going to combine, it need to probably be 4 and 2 or 1 and 3. And if you select 1 and 3, 1 or 3, there's no sense, in my opinion, of meandering those two. So if we were looking seriously at 4 or 2, is there not a way throughout the corridor to kind of parcel 2 where it seems to be appropriate and parcel 4 where it also seems to be appropriate? You know, maybe where higher traffic businesses, 4 makes sense, lower traffic businesses, 2 makes sense.
I think what we looked at was from 2nd to 5th is the area where we would expect over the long term we might get business development that would be this more Walla Walla feel of a downtown. So I think in terms of looking big picture, like when we looked at 2nd to 5th and then 5th to 14th, the 5th to 14th is its own series of options, but in our mind there's a few different reasons why in a traffic corridor you don't want to flip-flop things around all the time and hope that everyone gets it right. So I'd expect that our traffic safety person who's not here to represent themselves, but they probably would prefer to not, in just a number of blocks have several different configurations of bikes and cars. But definitely I think looking at downtown and saying what's appropriate for each piece makes sense. And the way that was broken out in the master planning documents was 2nd to 5th being a piece. And then circling back, something interesting on Councilmember Maloney's comments, a lot of his comments were pertaining to bigger picture planning documents that have been adopted. And so typically the way our projects work is we have these planning documents, and then from those we select projects to build, and we build it in accordance with those plans. And so the feedback we're getting is a kind of a bigger picture questioning of those planning documents and what those were calling us to do on our project. And so it's a tricky situation where, perhaps, the question being asked isn't one of, for the Lewis Street project from 2nd to 5th, it was in the CIP budget, why are we doing this thing within that project? But it's really an out of scope question of, is this where this goes? Can't we put it somewhere else? What is the plan for parking? And have the bike ped plan and the parking plan and the transportation system master plan. And those documents all feed into us having done this project here. So really when we're kind of taking a step back, we're saying, well, we need to look at the transportation system master plan. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe the project shouldn't go here. Look at the bike ped plan. Maybe the bikes didn't belong on Lewis. Now that we really take a hard look at Lewis. So it's a very complex question to unravel several layers of those planning documents that usually take years to prepare and a lot of money, while our scope is just this one little project. So I just wanted to kick that out there that it's kind of like Mr. Zabel was saying, it's a little bit out of turn to be asking this type of a question at this stage of a design project. So it could be that waiting until we have a planning document to guide it would help look at a current look of downtown and where we want things. But just so that people are aware, that's the big picture questions being asked aren't necessarily in the scope of, how wide do we make a sidewalk from 2nd to 5th? Because those questions have been answered already in those planning documents well before our project ever came around. So it's definitely a tricky situation for all parties.
Councilmember Melny.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a quick comment. My previous business used to be actually down on 5th and Columbia, and the reason we actually moved to 13th and Lewis was because of the parking. It actually had a big drain on our business, not being able to have a large amount of parking. Obviously, we were a contractor store, so it's a little bit different, but I will say I would never be for pulling out parking spaces on Lewis because I think you would definitely have the death of the downtown. I will say that I'd be actually more for option where you're putting the pedestrian as in bike path on Clark. I think usually when people come to an area and they're actually going to be buying, they're actually driving their car. I don't know how many times you've gone to buy clothes and you're driving your bike or riding your bike. So to me, if you're economic sense and you really want people to spend in an area, you actually have to cater towards the automobile. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I would be, and also when I was in Europe, actually we rode bikes in the streets because the speeds were a lot lower in the downtown part of the city. And then once we got out of the city, then there was bike pass, so you could go, a lot faster because cars were going a lot faster. I realize we're not Germany, but to me, it made a lot more sense that you just rode with traffic, and then on the sidewalk you had, again, restaurant type atmosphere. So I would be actually more inclined towards the two, where you actually had in the downtown corridor, the bikes were going along with cars, or moving them to Clark Street. That was just my point of view. But I think the main thing is that we make sure that businesses could function, and I think really to function, you need to cater towards cars. I mean, there's a few restaurants in the downtown, and I definitely want them to have outdoor seating, but most of the businesses that I've actually talked to were businesses where you go in and buy a merchandise, whether it was clothing, hats, boots, apparel, and catering towards bike pass really, to me, wouldn't be the optional choice. I would never ride my bike to pick up boots or a cowboy hat or any kind of thing. So just throwing in my 2 cents. I don't know if it helps or not, but that's my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Milne. So hopefully you got a little better understanding and some comments and of maybe some more options that you could throw out there. But City Manager Dave Zabel, do you have anything else you would like us to add?
Yeah, I honestly think you should wait to get the downtown plan close to being done.
Okay. Well, if that's what we have to do, we have one chance. We get one chance to make this right. We want to make sure we get it right. And, as much as I want to get it going, it's important that we get it right the first time. So thank you very much for that, for the presentation and staff.
I will qualify that comment, Mayor, that if we were fully funded, I probably wouldn't make that recommendation, but we're only halfway there.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next we'll move along to item B of our agenda item, Life and Safety Plan APRA funding update. Director Rick White, would you like to get us going?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, and I'll introduce Mike Gonzalez, our Economic Development Manager. He's been working very, very closely with many downtown businesses to implement the ARPA funding program for increasing capacity in the downtown common wall area. And Mr. Gonzalez has a very brief presentation for that update.
I promise I won't be as long as that prior one. Well, it's great to be here. It's been a little while. Mike Gonzalez, Economic Development Manager, and as Rick White said, that I've been working really closely with the businesses on this life safety program, and I can certainly say there's a lot of gratitude, a lot of excitement, and I'll say most importantly, a lot of hope that this particular program is bringing. So it's really nice to see, especially coming off the grant funding. I think there's a real level of appreciation for the council and the money that's been granted. So it's great to see your hard work that expedited that, and really to see it in fruition. So just wanted to really give you a brief summary of what we're doing. This life safety program, it commenced on October 8th. We're working with Andrew Klein, who is performing these assessments. And he is just excellent, comes with really amazing credentials. He's the vice chair of the Washington State Building Council. Klein has been involved in national level standards and code development work for the past 10 years. So he is someone at the forefront of the industry. He's very well respected. He's on the Washington Building Council. So I can certainly say he's an authority on this. What he's doing, he's going in, he's talking with the business owners. He's talking about their business structure, what they're currently doing, what they ultimately want to do with their business. So he's giving a really thorough evaluation. I want to run through the numbers real quickly. We targeted 28 buildings that we've selected for this evaluation process. myself, Gina Vasquez, and GPDA, we visited downtown businesses in person. I personally made contact on the ground with 17 individuals, either that were owners or they were managers of businesses. Others have been either called or left with information. So we've definitely done really diligent work trying to connect with them individually, explain the program. We've had Spanish speakers with us. My Spanish is conversational, it's pretty good, but Gina is really excellent. DPDA, Oscar Martinez was with us. So we're really able to explain the program, you know, basically what we're doing with the evaluations and, you know, how it could impact their businesses. And again, just a level of excitement and what I see as hope. You know, these businesses have been through a tremendous amount. Again, coming off the grant process where many we were able to make whole and help them with their losses. This is kind of the next step in that process. So, you know, for me personally, you know, you get to know these business owners and what they've been through. So certainly the targeted businesses that can really use this and can be impactful right away is exciting to see. Andrew's going to create his report. He promises to get those out before the end of the year. But again, let's take a look at some of the numbers. 28 businesses that have been targeted for outreach, primarily in that downtown core zone from Columbia to Bonneville, from First to about 5th Street in that corridor. So I'm going to run through the 7 that we've been able to actually do evaluations with so far. Amora Mexico, Havana Cafe, Tipsy's, Galleria's Furniture, an office space that's adjacent to American Family Insurance right along 3rd, if you guys are familiar with that area. Ciao Trattoria, and also the living space above there. And then I'm missing one. I think it's Grace's Kitchen. Yes, so that, and we actually, that would be 8 because we did an 8th one today, which was Galleria's. I did have one individual reach out to me that was from outside that downtown core. That was Salvador Rodriguez. He is the owner of Desert Heat. So he heard through the grapevine that this program is going on, and he certainly wanted to be a part of it. So I visited with him today a little bit, explained the program, and I said, you know, make sure you reach out to your council people, and if you so desire, come to a city council meeting when you have the opportunity to speak. So he's going to take that into consideration. Any questions?
Any questions? No, that was.
I like it.
That was good.
Okay, yeah. So again, I think it's going really well, and the businesses are really excited, and they'll have that process done hopefully by the new year. So and the next step, I think everybody's really excited about that next step of what's going to happen. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike.
So Mike.
This is Councilmember Maloney. I apologize. I was muted.
Go ahead.
So I apologize for missing my opportunity earlier.
Sure.
So Mr. Gonzalez, I think we've tentatively put aside or, you know, kind of earmarked $750,000 for sort of this program. Is there a sense from the consultant as to whether that's, how far is that going to get us given the sort of thing? I understand the reports will be coming out later, so I know I'm asking for early information, but what's your impression of that?
I think it's going to really depend on the number of businesses that we're able to provide this service to. Now, I mean, we've reached out to, you know, close to 24 businesses. There's going to be a certain level of interest. You know, so my gut tells me we're probably going to max out at 9 or 10 businesses that are interested in this. And I think restaurants obviously are a priority. You know, certainly our Mexican restaurants really like to do karaoke and things of that nature and have DJs. So, you know, some of these uses aren't permitted with the current structures of the building. So they're really going to need those, where somebody like someone who fixes boats, or, you know, I've gone directly to a business that fixes cars and things of that nature. So it's really not on their priority list in terms of their business model. So I think a lot's going to be dependent on that. So again, depending on that number, and then there's also varying degrees of cost. When you look at a restaurant like Amara Mexico, she's got close or even over 5,000 square feet. So to sprinkler her building, she's had some estimates anywhere from $50,000 all the way up to $100,000. So if you have a high priority building like that, where Havana Cafe, that's 8,000 square feet. So his estimates again range from anywhere from 50 all the way up to $100,000, depending how you do it. Where you have a Tipsy's, that's 2,000 square feet. They may not need it, and I think that's where the evaluations are also going to distinguish, what the needs are. But then you have a Grace's Kitchen, giant building, 8,000 square feet. Now, depending on the uses, if she just uses one floor, that's going to be a lot more cost effective. So, I think someone like Andrew Klein, who's an expert at it, he can take those varying degrees and hopefully tailor it to the business model. So I think we're going to have to be creative depending on the number of businesses that qualify, but also, you may need to consider expanding the amount of money if it is available.
Okay, I appreciate that kind of early look. And then the other question I have is, will we be getting a kind of an overall report? I mean, these reports, I think, if I understand correctly, are intended for each individual business. But I imagine that with his expertise, he's going to have maybe some overall generalized type recommendations. Will that be provided to council for
Yes.
As an understanding?
Yes, it's my understanding that those recommendations will go to the business owners and also to the council and city staff. Because this is going to be a learning experience for us as well to see how we can maximize the uses for these businesses. So, and I think that's, me personally, why the city council was so generous and city staff to offer this service, because he's not only providing the service, but he's educating the businesses on, how to maximize some of their uses and get general questions answered. So I think Andrew's been a really good partner with the city in that regard to put another set of eyes on, how do we maximize the uses for your business? Because, I certainly believe in that core. If we get some sprinklers into some of these key buildings, it's going to be a real game changer to maximize the uses, to get more foot traffic, to get people to come if they want to do karaoke and sing or have a DJ, have that opportunity. If that's what the market bears, then, let's give them the opportunity.
Great. And I just want to clarify that one last point there. If there's any generalized recommendations that may come out of this, of the way we're approaching it, either as through our city code that's within our control, and some of those other changes. I know we're going through the downtown master plan. Is it going to feed through that? Is it going to come to us separately? What mechanism? I guess if he's doing all this work, and I'm sure he's going to see some stuff that could be great recommendations for us as a city to approach. I'm just trying to understand what that mechanism and timing might look like for those. I don't want to jump the gun and get out ahead of it. We got to have these things all come together. So I'm just trying to understand what that looks like.
The way that I see it, Councilman, is his recommendations are going to come through the chute first, and I think the way, and we'll have to massage a little bit. But as city staff, we can certainly work with framework and make those suggestions if he has any. Primarily he's trying to stick to, just how do we maximize the sprinkler opportunities within your business. So, that's priority one. So, some of the natural conversations that occur, those recommendations, he shared with me, so I'll certainly pass those on to staff. And I think holistically, it's material that we can use in that downtown master plan, because like you saw in the previous presentation, I mean, there's coding issues, there's sidewalk issues, there's fire issues, there's all sorts of issues that, I mean, certainly one can get out ahead of another, but I think once all this information comes in, and you really keep that focus on the downtown master plan and taking that information and putting it there, I think that's going to be the most effective thing. But I understand where you're coming from. Where's this information going to go? Is it going to go here, there? Where, who's going to ultimately get it? I think ultimately city staff is going to have to take that and figure out how we best apply that.
Great. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Thank you, Councilmember Maloney. Councilmember Serrano?
Yeah, Mike, if we can get some type of clear scoring criteria with this, publication or whatever Andrew's doing, that'd be helpful. And what I'm thinking of is something that covers the two questions: how to maximize for the individual business and how to maximize the city's investment overall. And I could see a scoring criteria that says, you know what, the $100,000 is really valuable, for a particular business because it allows karaoke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we hear about comedians, live shows, entertainment, all that stuff. As opposed to one which may just, back to your point, I'm not opposed to boat shops, I'm not opposed to car shops, but at the same time, what type of traffic will that drive? You know, we just spent an hour and a half talking about, well, an hour and 15 minutes talking about bikes, cars, and restaurants, how they could maximize their outdoor seating. If we can maximize the investments we're making here and get that criteria strictly in front of us, we may be in the position where we have to make the hard decision of like, we're going to go with A and C, but not B, right? And so if we could get that clearly laid out, and obviously as we get the information, maybe we can help massage the analysis so that it presents well.
Certainly. I'll talk to Andrew tomorrow, so and try to catch up with him before the holiday hits, and come up really with a strategy to maximize, you know, that business foot traffic, because you know, initially we're trying to stay focused on the fire issue, because you know, it's really easy to kind of meld off into, well, what code can I do, or what can, you know, what code? So you know, that's really not the intent for him to come in and say you can do this with that, you know. So we're really trying to keep focused on that, and then, you know, if he can help and give advice in other certain areas, you know, business owners are welcoming that, but we're really trying to keep them focused, at least at this phase, with the idea of expanded intent for those businesses. Because, you know, what I'm seeing through this process too is a lot of our businesses, they get in there with an intended use, thinking, I'm going to take this building, I'm going to, you know, make my dreams come true, and then, oh, you can't do that because you're not in compliance with the fire code. So, you know, this has been educational for them as well, so.
Well, we appreciate your efforts. You're the right guy to do this, so thanks, man.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. All right, one more for this particular agenda item. Number 5 is the Establish an American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA Fund, and amend ARPA contracts. Director Richa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and evening council. Continuing the theme of discussing the ARPA funds and its usage, there is a whole administrative task of managing those funds. And as I've mentioned to council many times before, there's new requirements that are being either clarified or created by the Department of Treasury. And there's also some business standards that we might not have thought of that we're trying to implement. One such business standard is essentially creating a new fund for all of the ARPA funds. And what that does is it helps really create a good container for those funds. They're once in a lifetime sort of, not a grant for a particular project that has an exact schedule. We've got about 6 years to spend the money, or 5 years. So what we are recommending and what's on the docket is essentially creating a new fund called Arpa Fund, where we would transfer all of the funds that we have received so far, which has been deposited to general fund, and all of the expenses as well, and move it to this new fund. And you'll also see a budget ordinance that goes with it, as we discussed last week. Each fund that council has to authorize a budget for revenue and expenses. So this is kind of a two-part action. One is that if you approve, you would create an ARPA fund, and then you would add the revenue to it, anticipating the next allocation that is going to be received next year, and then the transfer from the general fund that has already been received as well. The budget ordinance also anticipates that we're going to spend all of our ARPA allocation in the next year. I know that council is very interested in taking all of the funds out to the community as quickly as possible. That might not be possible, but we wanted to include all of the ARPA funds as expenses for this biennium. So that is, if council approves, it would be on the docket for next week.
Okay. Thank you, Director Richa. Any questions or comments from council?
This is Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, Councilmember Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Martinez, and thank you, Director Signal. I've got no issues at all with what you propose here. It makes a lot of sense for for tracking purposes. When we're looking at certain projects, like for example the funding we've authorized to support the water utility, my understanding is that those funds won't be able to buy any one thing. It will go to support an overall set of projects. When we're looking at this funding mechanism, how tightly does it have to be tied to specific identifiable projects as opposed to into the overall, funding resources that need, for something like, water utilities in this case?
Thank you for asking that question, and it really goes into the administrative task and framework that we're working to build on. At this point, from all of just knowing federal grants and the requirements and the guidance that we've read, it is that it has to be a one-on-one, not just with projects, but we also have to be able to show where essentially each dollar went. As an example, with our utility assistance grant, we have all of the applications from BDI, from PUD, from our own utility, and all of those applications add up to a number, and that is what we have to show during our federal grant audits. Similarly, for larger projects like the $9 million for the water utility, they have to pass a certain test to be eligible. And so that is why you see the $9 million for two projects. I do not remember them off the top of my head. I want to say one of them is a reservoir project, and the other one is the Butterfield expansion project. I could be wrong, but they're both safe drinking water eligible projects, and that is why they qualify. And so they can only be, that 9 million can't just be transferred to the water utility because there's a need, but that has to be spent within those two projects. That is as allowed by the grant guidance. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does. So what we would see is ultimately an expenditure from our ARPA fund that's being proposed for creation, and that money would then be allocated specifically to a identifiable project, or would the money transfer over to the utility? I know this is an arcane question. I apologize.
No.
That's a detailed question, but I'm just trying to understand. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we as a city have received a significant amount of funding from the federal government, and we're trying to allocate the best we possibly can for the city. And I guess I want to be able to stand up and clearly say, okay, here's how I can go back and say, aha, this is what we spent money on. This is how we allocated. This is how we, as a city council, were working what's at the best interest for the city.
Absolutely. We track every penny for that purpose. And in fact, we have reporting requirements with the Department of Treasury for every quarter to do that, but also within our own financial systems and tracking purposes, we track all of the allocations made by the council down to the penny. So you can be assured that you can ask for a report from staff and be able to get all of that accounting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Director Rachel. Anyone else? All right. Did you say that was going to come to us in the next meeting?
Yes, and just as an FYI, Mayor, we are also looking at amending the 3 contracts that we've signed with BDI, Franklin PUD, as well as Chamber of Commerce next council meeting, and you will see that in your agenda. That is not anything that substantially changes our agreements and prior contracts, but as new requirements come in, we're just formalizing and making sure that those requirements are met. So just a heads up for next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, next item will be a miscellaneous council discussion, and you said next week, but do we have a meeting next week? It's not next week, correct? It's
December 6th.
Excuse me?
December 6th.
December 6th.
Yes.
Right, so the December 6th meeting. All right, next, under miscellaneous discussion, the council has put in a lot of time and a lot of work here the last couple of meetings, and I think City Manager Dave Zabel would like to make a suggestion.
So, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and that is absolutely true. And matter of fact, Council, you're slightly a bit ahead schedule. So one, I want to express our appreciation, staff and myself, for the early starts, the few meetings we did this month, including this evening. It allowed us to get a lot of business done this month. The biennial budget adjustment, the CIP update, the utility rates, the labor agreements that we concluded, as well as just our normal routine of business that we do. And so typically, a couple of the items we approved tonight would actually be approved at the first meeting in December. So like I say, we're a bit ahead of schedule. Over the past several years, with our major business completed by the first meeting in December, councils canceled the subsequent December meetings. That's typically, I mean, it's for a number of reasons. One, business is pretty light during the holidays in the first place. Demands are light in terms of the public, and pressure on staff and council because of holiday and family obligations over the holidays generally fairly high. So there's a lot of folks out of the office, and it just becomes kind of difficult to staff and perhaps even a quorum for a meeting on close to and around Christmas. So unless there's objection to council, we'd propose to bring a resolution the next week, on your December 6th meeting, canceling the 13th, 20th, and December 27th meetings.
Well, any objections to council, on this topic?
Nope. We've been doing this for several years, and there hasn't been.
Councilmember Maloney can come if he wants. You want to come, Councilmember Maloney?
No objections at all. I just wanted to make sure I knew what exactly day in January, because I'm going to forget all about you for like 3 weeks.
Okay. All right, and there's another item of discussion.
So I did want to advise council that we have a sufficient pool of candidates for your Historic Preservation Commission and Parks and Recreation Commission. If there's an interest on council, Mayor would appreciate having a subcommittee so we can review those applications and perhaps make appointments for the end of the year.
Okay.
And we can make arrangements if that's of interest.
With that said, can we have a couple of volunteers? Councilmember Serrano, thank you very much. Councilmember Milne and Mayor Pro Tem Barajas, thank you so much. I guess I didn't give you a chance to, well, I didn't see Mr. Maloney and Councilmember Alvarado, but you guys were on another committee, so I thank you so much for volunteering.
Sounds good.
That's just the three of us, not.
That's correct, just the three of you for the subcommittee.
If it was you, then we'd be at forum this year.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not going to be there. But our city clerk, I don't know if you or April will be providing the information. Okay.
That's fine. I just want to make sure we didn't hit the for a forum.
Sure. Thank you. And then just for the record, the Boy Scouts from the Cheravita development are going to be presenting with leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance on the December 6th meeting. Okay.
And for clarification, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just so I get back to them, that meeting's starting at 7, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anything else from anybody else on the council or staff? Well, appreciate it. Thank you so much for tonight, for attending, and for those that are listening online. It is 8:39, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Oh, shoot. Forgot to mention. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.